super easy to learn and very easy to play, but it starts with setup. We've got a deck of 54 cards. There are 45 monsters in here, 3 copies each of 15 monsters, and there are 9 action cards. So the first thing we need to do is get this deck spread out so we can start matching. And I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to take these cards, I'm going to make 6 rows of 9 cards across to spread out all 54. Okay, at the core of Mad Match are those 3 monsters that I just mentioned. What we're trying to do is match monsters. So a pair is good, but 3 is better. So we're always looking for 3 of a kind. Now you can get 3 on one turn, or you can add a monster to your pair later in the game for a spare. And that will come out in scoring, which we'll talk about at the end of the game. But for now we're going to focus on matching cards and something else called action cards, which will come out as we play. So basic play goes like this. Player 1 turns over 3 cards, trying to make a match. I've got Pogo Snake, Uniplasma, Carrot Pillar, no match. Then player 2 would turn over 3 cards and try to make a match. And if in those cards there's a pair, they get taken. If all 3 match, even better, they get taken. They're collected to that player's side for scoring. Now, what we've got here, this just showed up. This is called an action card. All the action cards have a red background on the face of the card, and they do different things. Several of the action cards allow one player to steal cards that the opponent has collected, or to destroy cards, which means remove them from play. There's another kind of action card, a third kind of action card, which allows freeze play. And that's what this is. This is the glue bottle. The glue bottle freezes cards in this turn, this means this player's turn, for the rest of the game, and it says 3 cards. This is the only, the freeze action cards are the only cards that change the turnover 3 cards rule. Because when one of these shows, there have to be at least 3 facing cards. So we'll turn over 1 more. Now these 3 cards, these 3 monster cards, stay in play, turned up, face up for the rest of the game. And the glue bottle would get discarded. So that's kind of how the action cards play into it. And for the rest of it, it's just matching, trying to match 3s and collect as many as you can. The action cards, the destroy cards, and the steal cards will allow for a bit of strategy, especially when we talk about scoring. But for basic gameplay, the first focus is making matches, pairs or triplets. Now that stays up. I thought maybe not. I'm turning over the same 3 cards. Oh, I got confused. I thought Uniplasma and was Yuka Semi-Auto. So that was player 1. So player 2 would turn over another 3 cards. We've got Mr. Potato Hammers. He's down in the corner. So now, because as player 2, I turned over my 3 cards. I'll turn these 2 back over. But because Mr. Potato Hammers was showing, I get to take him. And that's basic play. Now this is an example turn. We have a couple of frozen cards. Now let's imagine that I am a player who comes in, and these are the 3 that I turn over. I turn over a Stealth Chip, which is going to become Stealth Nacho in the final game. Brain Stool. Now he's over there. That's good for me. And I turn over another Brain Stool. So now I've got all 3. All 3 on one turn, and this is significant for scoring, which we'll talk about later. I collect those as 3 because that happened on one turn. And when we come to scoring, that'll be significant. Now, if we're going to do a hypothetical. Let's say I already had a pair of Brain Stools. And on my turn, I turned over these 3 cards. Stealth Chip, Vamp Flower, Brain Stool. I can collect the Brain Stool and add it, but I'm going to add it as a spare because they were not collected on the same turn. So if all 3 come out in one turn, it goes like this. We will stack them straight up for scoring. If it comes out in a later turn, we're gonna put the third card sideways, and like I said, that we call that a spare, and that gets scored differently at the end of the game. So one thing to keep in mind. Here's another sample of how things could go down. I'm playing as this player, the one who has Brain Stool, not as the player over here who has Mr. Potato Hammers, a pair of Mr. Potato Hammers. So I'm the opposing player to the one who has the pair. And let's say I do my turn, and these are the 3 cards that I turn up. Now, first of all, Mr. Potato Hammers is my opponent's card. Since I don't have the pair, that card gets discarded. You can only collect for a spare if you have it. You can't take a card on credit for your opponent's card. You can end up with 1 card if an opponent steals cards from you, so when it comes to scoring, you could end up with a single copy of a monster, but if your opponent has the pair, it gets automatically discarded at the time of that turn. Here's something else. This action card showed up. This is Crazy Straw. This is a steal card. I would collect that, and at some point later in the game, I can use that in my turn. Okay, our game has progressed a little bit, and we started to collect some cards. We have this Brain Stool. Player 1, we'll say player 1 is on this side, is a Brain Stool 3 collected in 1 turn. He has a Vamp Flower spare, which means he collected a pair and then added the 3rd on a later turn. And then he has an action card, which is a Crazy Straw, which allows him to steal a card from an opponent. On this side of the table, which we'll call player 2, he has a couple of pairs, or several pairs, and he has a spare, an Apple Saucer spare, which is with the kind of tapped card over here, shows that was collected on a later turn. And he's got 2 action cards. He has a steal, and then Annihilation. He has a Fishing Pole, which is a steal a card, and Annihilation Grenade, which is remove 2 opponent cards from play, and that means destroys card. Now, the action cards, the steal and destroy cards are, when they're used, they take the place of a turn. So instead of turning over 3 cards and trying to make a match, a player can opt to steal cards from an opponent or destroy cards. Now, generally speaking, action cards, you're going to want to use them later in play as your opponent has started collecting cards. And you'll be looking at the scoring matrix on each of your opponent's cards to decide which ones you want to steal and or destroy, because then you have the potential to either reduce your opponent's score or increase your score by stealing good cards. And when we get to the scoring part, that might make a little more sense. But just to show how this might work, let's say that at this point in the game, player 1 on this side decides to steal a card. And he looks probably one of his better options from a scoring standpoint is going to be to turn this Apple Saucer spare into a pair. So he's going to actually steal this, which means he can score that card at the end of the game, and the action card gets discarded, and he's decided to do that. Now that's his turn, so there's no turning over cards. Now let's say player 2, he can do a couple of things. He could take he can turn over his 3 cards and do a regular turn and try to make a match. He can take his Annihilation Grenade and destroy 2 cards, in which case, if he were going to do that, he'd probably want to either destroy 1 or 2 of the Vamp Flowers, and 1 or 2 of the, and I got confused. He's going to want to destroy 1 or 2 Vamp Flowers, 1 or 2 Brain Stools, or 1 of each, depending on how he does the math in his head. And those, let's say he decides to destroy 2 Brain Stools. They get discarded. The action card gets discarded, and that's over. As an alternative, he might have chosen to use his Fishing Pole to steal back the Apple Saucer. It's a question of whether he wants to, at this point in the game, reduce the opponent's score or increase his own score. And if he does steal back the Apple Saucer, which he can do, it would go in as a spare. If this had originally been a strike, if this had been 3 cards on 1 turn, and the opponent stole away Apple Saucer, when he steals it back, it goes back as a spare, because they are no longer collected on the same turn. Here's one more example of action play. This is using another freeze card, and this is a scenario that could come up. So, I'll be player 1. As I play my hand, I turn over this action card, which is the Ice Cube Ray. The Ice Cube Ray freezes the next 2 turns. So that means, as player 1, it means my 3 cards, and the 3 cards that player 2 will turn over. Now, in this situation, first of all, so I've done 1. Ice Cube Ray was my second card, but that doesn't count in a freeze situation. So another Return of the Blob, and then an action card. So in this situation, I've turned over the cards. They are frozen. However, they're playable. So for my turn, I can still, even though it's a freeze card, I collect the pair and I collect the action card. So unfortunately, nothing was frozen for my opponent, but that's just the way it happens sometimes. So now player 2 goes, and remember, the Ice Cube Ray is a freeze 2 turn. So player 2 goes and first reveals 3 cards. Now, there was already a Bot Rocket frozen and a Peanut Butter Cup frozen. I've added 2 Bot Rockets. So on this turn, thanks to the Ice Cube Ray, player 2 gets to collect the 3 Bot Rockets as a strike, as a 3 straight up, and then these 2 cards get turned back over, and now Ice Cube Ray gets discarded. So that's how you would play out. That's a little bit of an odd situation, but it certainly can come up in play, and that's how you'd play it. Another thing that can happen is that action cards might not show up until literally the last turn in Mad Match, which means if you don't use them by the end of the game, when you collect action cards, if you don't use them by the time you run out of cards in the play area for matching, they're thrown out. So while strategically it's a good idea to hang on to them for late in the game to help affect your score, at the same time, if you don't use them, you lose them. So that needs to be kept in mind. And if they show up, like I said, in the last turn, too bad. Same goes for freezes and things like that. If it's at the very end of the game and there are just a few cards in play and you happen to turn over a freeze and there's not enough to freeze, end of the game. You collect what you can, turn over if you can, and then if there's nothing left for the other player to collect, that's the end of the game. Scoring. Okay, so I'm taking what was from kind of our sample game, a chunk of player 1's hand. Normally, in most instances, a player would have more than this in a 2-player game or would have collected more cards, but I want to keep it simple. I also want to point out that as you look at these cards, this is we're actually doing this with a prototype deck, and the final decks have a little extra detail in the scoring box to make scoring easier. And we'll put up some screenshots so you see what I mean. But basically, the way that scoring works is there are, on each card, there are 4 boxes. So from left to right, what they mean are a strike, which is all 3 cards collected in 1 turn, then a spare, which is a pair that was collected, and then later in the game the player adds the 3rd card, and we talked about how to display that sort of canted to the side like that, which is how this one. So this Vamp Flower was a spare. The next number from left to right, so the 3rd number from left to right, is if the player got a pair, that's how you would score the card. And the last number all the way to the right is if a single card was collected, which can happen. You can't really collect a single card, but you might have a pair or a threesome that gets part of your cards get stolen or destroyed, or part of your set gets stolen or destroyed, or you might steal a single card, and so that's where you would be counting the 1 number, or the number for a single card. The way that you score is each card gets scored. So if you have a pair, so let's look at the Carrot Pillar pair. Carrot Pillar pair, the pair scoring number is 1. Which is the second from the right. I don't know if you can see that. Second from the right. So each card gets scored. So each card is worth 1 point. So that's 2. The Vamp Flower is a spare. So the second from the left, the score is a 4. Each card gets scored, so it's 4 times 3. And that's 12. So that would be 2 plus 12, 14. Brain Stooler's just 1. that's worth 2. So that becomes 16. And Return of the Blob is a pair, and the pair score is a 4. So 4 and 4 is 8, because each card gets scored. So 8 plus 16. So we've got 24. And that's how you score. I will do the same for this player, had a few more cards. The pair of Potato Hammers, the pair number is 2, so that's worth 4. Stealth Chip, which is will be Stealth Nacho. The pair number is 2, so that's 4. So we've got 4, we've got 8. Finger Bowl pair, the pair number is 2, so another 4, so that's 12. Yuka Semi-Auto is a spare. You can see by how it was canted. The third card was canted to the side. So the spare is 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. And we were at, I think, 12, so that's 21. A Hot 3, which is not a spare. It's all 3 collected in one turn. So the number is 5. So 5 times 3, that's 15. So 21 and 15, what's that, 36? And the Apple Saucer is a spare, and the spare number is 4, so 4 times 3 is 12. So what did we say? 36, 12, 48? So 48 to 24. Player 2 in this instance won, and there's 2 things you can do. First is, that could be the end of the game. Player 2 wins, that was fun, that was all 10 minutes, and you got to kind of screw your neighbor over with a few steals and a few freezes and a few destruction cards. So good fun. The other thing you can do is set a total, and this works really well with if you have 3 or 4 players playing, because the scoring will go a little slower. But also, what we find is, very often when you have 3 or 4 players, somebody tends to not do well, and somebody tends to do really well in a given game. But then things will completely change in the next game. So what's fun to do is to set a total. In the case of 3 or 4 players, you might want to use a smaller number. In the case of 2 players, you might want to say 100 points or 150 points. And play progressive games and keep a running track of your total from game to game. And the first player to hit or exceed 150 points in the two-player version, what I'm talking about, that player, that wins. So you might play 3, 4, 5 games, and until somebody hits that total. And that's a fun way to do it. You can do, like I said, you can do the same thing with 3 or 4 players. You might want to set, because the score is obviously with 3 or 4 players, the cards are going to be spread out more, and so the scoring is going to be kind of diffused, I guess. So you might want to set a total of like 80 points or 100 points to play toward. Or you can set it at 500 points and play for hours and hours and hours because you're going to have so much fun. It's all up to you. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope that everything makes sense and this gets you started. It really is a great game, a lot of fun. It plays quickly. It's great for all ages. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to email me, mad@popestreet.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I can't wait to hear what you think about Mad Match. Thanks very much.